Passive listening is the best thing you can do to learn Japanese. Now, about a week ago, I made this video, which I'm sure you've already seen because that's probably why you're here. But it's essentially just a really rough guide on how to do immersion learning and how to learn Japanese with an immersion method. The whole premise of the video is just get mass amounts of exposure and let your brain do the rest, and you'll eventually get good at Japanese. And for this video to make more sense, I would highly recommend going and watching it if you haven't already. Now, one of the ways that I recommended getting a ton of exposure to Japanese for essentially free is by doing something called passive listening. To put it simply, passive listening is essentially just going about your day normally, except you put an earbud in and listen to Japanese passively for as long as you can. Now, if you've never heard of this idea, it might sound crazy at first, like, what? You're just listening to Japanese all day? Why would you do that? Why don't you go study in a textbook or something? Based on the comments of my last video, it seems like not a lot of people have actually been exposed to this idea, so I just kind of wanted to take a deep dive looking into why passive immersion is so beneficial and give you guys some helpful advice on how to make the most out of your time doing it. Now, to really understand why passive immersion is such a powerful tool, we're going to have to look at the mechanism for which you're actually going to learn Japanese, which is by getting mass exposure to the language and building a deep subconscious understanding of how it works. Now, I basically explained all of this in my last video about how to actually do immersion learning, so I'm not really going to go into every detail here, but the goal is essentially just to overload your brain with so much language to the point where understanding just comes naturally to you. But before we get into all of that, let me tell a story real quick. Now, imagine you're me from 5 years ago and you just quit Duolingo because you're not fluent after 3 days and you're thinking, how the hell am I ever supposed to learn this language? A few months pass and you've completely forgotten about seriously trying to learn the language, and instead you're just sitting in your room alone binging the newest episode of some trash isekai anime and watching Abroad in Japan videos on YouTube thinking, God, I wish that was me. Soon after, I discovered immersion learning, and then that's when I realized, oh my god, I don't have to use a textbook, I don't have to take a class, I don't even have to study grammar. All I have to do is just listen to Japanese all day and I'll get good. Now, when I first discovered immersion learning, people talked as if the best way to immerse is just to sit in front of a screen attentively and watch content in Japanese for hours a day, and that passive immersion was just a small bonus thing you could do to fill in the gaps in your time. Now, I have what some people like to call TikTok brain, so when I told myself, yeah, I can do that, I can watch things in Japanese for hours a day, every day, how hard can it be? I didn't realize the extent of my crippling video game addiction. So, what did I do to solve this? Nothing, I still have crippling video game addiction. Unable to force myself to sit there for hours on end every day consuming Japanese content, I instead just embraced passive listening and turned to audio content for the vast majority of my immersion. Now, when you're like me and you have a job that requires driving around in a car all day, you can actually rack up a ton of listening hours because all you really have to do is not listen to music and choose to listen to Japanese instead. You can extrapolate this to any other part of your life.